My name is Hai Nguyen. I am co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Matrix. My goals for today, this is an introductory webinar, so it is a guide for beginners, but I want to help you understand the basics of Matrix to help you become more effective and efficient at prioritizing tasks, projects, and emails, help you envision what your work and life success may look like with PM. And then also, importantly, I want to give you 20% of the features in Matrix that I think will give you 80% of the benefits. One of the things I always say is, Matrix has a whole suite of features, and the vast majority of you would not have to use all of it. In fact, there's only a few things that I think is extremely impactful, and then based on your specific use cases, you can leverage Matrix to take it to the next level. I also want to provide some tips and tricks to help you prioritize better starting today. And one of the reasons I emphasize this is because, in my opinion, productivity and being efficient and effective is more around mindset rather than features in the product itself. Honestly, I'm sure the vast majority of you, so many different software in the past, and looked at all the ways in which you can prioritize tasks and so forth. So there's really nothing that, Matrix differentiates so much that it is like the number one factor. Instead, it's how you think about the software. And so hopefully I'll give you some guidance on how to best leverage Matrix to make you successful. And then lastly, I want to help you walk away feeling productive and have a strategy to be aligned with your team. If you walk away from today's webinar and you're excited about using the software to make sure that everyone's working on the right things, then I know I've done my job and that this webinar is a good use of your time. So why do you even prioritize? There's three reasons why customers come to Matrix. First, it's to better keep track on the status of work across many areas of responsibilities. We all have a lot on our table, a lot on our plate, and I speak for myself as well. There's just so many things that's going on. It's very difficult to be within context and know what it is that you need to work on and then understand what are the priorities across the entire team. What happened is that a lot of team members have a lot of stuff that's in their brain. They know what they're supposed to work on. They work on it. But the challenge is that others do not know that. And so it is very, very difficult to have that alignment. And then not only that, one of the challenges I'm hearing over and over again from customers is that employee turnovers are happening or continue to happen at a higher rate than ever before. And so what that means is that someone will leave the organization and now you're faced with the challenges of understanding what it is that they worked on, what are the things that someone else needs to take over. And so if you're a manager, I'm sure you're struggling with that so often, which is one of your core employees is sick or is on leave for whatever reason, and now you need someone else to take over the job, but you don't know what job it is that they're supposed to take over, right? So Matrix makes it possible to overcome some of those challenges. And then thirdly, to take back control of emails and meetings. I get a couple hundred emails per day, and vast majority of it are not urgent, to tell you the truth. Some are very important. And so being able to go and triage that and then ensuring that I always get to my important emails is actually so important. And then the corollary to that question around prioritization is what happens when you don't prioritize. I bring this up because some of you will walk away from today's webinar and do nothing, which is totally okay, and you stick with the status quo. And so I want you to just remind yourself why you came to this webinar, why you seek out something like Matrix in the first place. But I think the three biggest challenges I see are the following. One, you lose sight of what's important and you work on the wrong things. And sometimes it's not at our own fault. It's that we don't know what's important. That has to be communicated to us from our manager. That has to be communicated to us from our clients and so forth. And then secondly, you feel busy, but you're not meeting your goals, as in you're working on a lot of stuff, but it's just a constant influx of tasks. And then thirdly, you're overwhelmed by emails and meetings. I feel that sometimes too, which is there's just more tasks are added to the list than the resources to do them. And so being able to understand where I should focus my time is such an important distinction in how we manage our priorities. So what is Matrix? It's a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software that helps at three different levels. At the individual level, which is the most important in my opinion, it helps you prioritize your most important tasks and emails every single day. So I implore you to make sure that you use Protomatrix to prioritize the things that you have to do, because if you're successful, everything else will fall into place. Secondly, if you're able to prioritize your tasks well and you're on top of your things, imagine having all your team members be on the same page as you, and then have all of them also prioritize their tasks and their emails. So then when you guys have a meeting and you're talking to each other, you have complete alignment. That's key. Then thirdly, as different teams within your organizations use Protomatrix, what happens is Protomatrix create what I call a single source of truth. So what that means is that when someone leaves the organization or someone moves on and take a different role, someone else can come in and have full context, complete understanding of all the priorities of all the tasks that's left to do, as well as an understanding of everything else that's been done. And so we are actually working on all sorts of capabilities to make this possible, to help your organization achieve unprecedented alignment, and making sure that you have this continuity of knowledge over time. So what makes Protomatrix better than a lot of other solutions? One, we're the only software solution that's Microsoft 365 security certified across Teams, Outlook, and web. We're deeply integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. So if you happen to use Microsoft Office, Office Suite, etc., Protomatrix is almost a no-brainer because we actually integrate into Teams, into Outlook, and we're also one of the very first to integrate into Copilot, which is their new AI system. So I bring that up because I want you to know that it's future-proofing your work as well. So what happens is that using Protomatrix, even if you don't adopt some of these things today, in the future, when you do adopt them within the Microsoft ecosystem, we're already there. And then it is not required for you to use any of the Microsoft ecosystem. We work with Google signed in, we work with the web, desktop apps, and so forth. But this just happens to be the case. Protomatrix also focuses on prioritization. I think that's our core competency, and that's why the software is called what it is. So therefore, when you've probably seen so many other task management software, right? They're for managing tasks, or they're for collaboration, et cetera. But what we emphasize is making sure that you understand what it is that you need to work on, doing the right things first, not just doing things right. Protomatrix also provides different views on the data that you have to provide what I call people-centric collaboration. What that means is you can use Protomatrix in a totally different way than you've ever used before, which is to understand the tasks you have to work on for other individuals. And so it's a very different way of looking at the same information. And then lastly, or second to last, Protomatrix is available as a SaaS solution, which is a standard web application. But we also have HIPAA compliance for healthcare and life sciences, as well as Azure Government Cloud for state and local government, and then private enterprise deployment. So if you're interested in the other solutions, definitely reach out to me and I'd be happy to walk you through that. And then lastly, we actually are implementing AI features, but our focus is on actually creating specific value for you. So we're not trying to build something that's generalized. We're trying to build it within the perspective of Protomatrix and how to actually help surface up things that matter. So what makes Protomatrix effective is that it helps you determine what needs to be done now, what needs to be done later, and what needs to be delegated. So one thing that I recognize, and I think we all should recognize, is that priorities are constantly shifting, right? Today's priorities might not be tomorrow's priorities. And in fact, every quarter, every month, every year, things are changing, and we should be able to accommodate that. But Protomatrix offer one place where everyone can go to know what needs to be done right now. And that's the key. If priorities are constantly shifting, it is so important that we understand what's the latest, right? Instead of having to read through 15 email threads, instead of having to have meetings just to be aligned, you can go into your Protomatrix and see what everyone's working on. So let's start with a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is that it takes everything that we have to do and breaks it into the dimensions of importance and urgency. Now, think about it. What are the 15 things you have to do? Just go through your list right now that's on in your brain. So if I ask you to write down those 15 things, and you write them down, and I ask you to decide what to work on, where do you start? Do you start at the top of the list, or do you start at the bottom of the list? right? And then if I ask you to add more things to your list, where do you add it? Do you add it to the top or to the bottom? Or do you choose something random in the middle? So as you can see, a list is just not a very good way to track everything that we have to do. So instead, take those 15 things and go through each of them and ask, is this an important task? Is this an urgent task? And instead of having a list, you now have a matrix. So there's something called the Eisenhower Matrix. It's a very simple but powerful time management framework that categorizes everything you have to do into the 4 quadrants of importance and urgency. And what it does is it actually just makes it explicit. And that's the key word, which is, in our brain, we are always thinking about tasks that are important, right? It's very obvious that we know things that are important and things that are not important. But what happens is that when you put it into Party Matrix, you make it tangible and you make it explicit so then everyone can look at it and see what it is that you think is important and urgent. And what happens is that all those hard decisions makes it possible for you guys to have really powerful conversations. And so when you choose something to be in quadrant 1, when someone else's choose something to be in quadrant 1, and you guys have a conflict, that's a good thing. So the way it works in Protomatrix is we take everything that you have, those 15 things, for example, and split it into these 4 buckets. Quadrant 1, the important, urgent, are the things you should do now. These are the things you should really be spending your time on. In fact, if you have a lot of things in Quadrant 1, that's not a good thing. That means you have a lot of fires you're fighting. And then quadrant 2, those are the important but not urgent tasks. And so these are the things that you start planning for, you start thinking about in the back of your brain. And then finally, on the bottom left, instead of actually working on things that are urgent but not important, perhaps you could delegate them. Perhaps that's somebody that's your assistant or an external party who's not so critical into your workflow, who can take over those tasks. They have to be done, but they don't have to be done by you. And then lastly, instead of having any task that's not important or not urgent, instead you have the inbox, which is your repository of everything that you come up with. So how I think about it is the following. When you create a task in the very beginning, it may go in the inbox because you don't know where it belongs. But once there, you decide whether or not it goes in quadrant 1, 2, or 3. And do that every single time, and then ask your coworkers to do the exact same thing. Here's where the magic happens. After you do this exercise, walk around the office and compare notes. So if you have this quadrant with your priorities for whatever initiative that you work on, your manager does the exact same thing, your team members do the exact same thing, and you look at each other's matrices and you say, wait a minute, are we aligned on everything? And vast majority of the time, you may be aligned, but once in a while, you'll find discrepancy. And that's where you can focus your discussions instead. So your meetings can be a lot more efficient because you don't have to talk about things that you already agree on, right? You talk about the things that you disagree on that you don't have clarity on yet. And so that's not a very obvious thing for a lot of people, but that's one of those ways where I think we can all do a better job at, which is to take out the things that are obvious and unnecessary to talk about and focus on the frontiers, the stuff that aren't so obvious. So the 4-quadrant Eisenhower matrix create alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And therefore, the success from using Protomatrix isn't about finding out what everyone agrees on. It's discovering disagreement on what should be a priority when it isn't. So I don't want you to forget that analogy I just have, which is imagine being able to walk around the office and see a 4-quadrant box floating over everyone's head that highlights exactly what their priorities are. And if you're able to do that exercise, and if you're actually using Party Matrix in that way, it is so useful. Similarly, one of the suggestions I have for all of you is when you have a meeting, project Party Matrix onto the screen. So then everyone knows what your priorities are. So if you're a manager and you don't want to use Party Matrix with the rest of your team yet, and you're just creating the list of priorities that you think are important, project that on the screen during your staff meetings, and then everyone can look at it and say, okay, I see what you're talking about here, and let's focus on quadrant 1 for our discussions. So please do that. That's a very, very good use of our software. Okay, so a couple of tips, and then I'm going to jump into the actual product itself. If you're a manager, create a project for your team staff meetings and screen share, just as I said. Second, if you happen to manage multiple sites, then create a project for each site or location. So if you're a project manager with 5 or 10 projects, that's easy. Create 5 or 10 projects. So then you have clear distinctions on the priorities for each of those projects. If you're following some specific training programs or you have initiatives, create a project for each of those initiatives. So when I say a training program, so for example, let's just say if you're trying to get everyone within your organization to subscribe to a specific framework, right? A training framework, you can actually create a Party Matrix project that highlights that framework and then create a template from that. Then every employee gets their own matrix, and then they can say, okay, these are the things I have to do to follow those guidelines. If you're a business owner, create a project for each of your departments. That's actually very, very a powerful way to ensure that you know what's going on within your organization without having to have the meetings. So one of the things that I think people are challenged by is that they don't know what's going on within the organization, but they're too scared to ask. And so by creating the matrix and by letting your employees update the matrix at their convenience, you don't have to be in the meeting to be on the same page. And so instead of doing things synchronously, you do things asynchronously. And then lastly, if you're an individual contributor, create a project for each of your goals for your own work. So one of the recommendations I have in Party Matrix is always create a project to help you get promotions. It's a very obvious thing, but create a project that highlights the things you got to do this year in order to get promoted. Then every time you look at Party Matrix, you realize, hey, am I working towards those goals? So keep that in mind. And I'll show you how to create a project to achieve that promotion, for example. Okay, as I mentioned, the webinars are hosted on our website here. And then, we have a lot of other various topics and so forth. And also there's recording of our webinars in Spanish, German, Hindi, French, and a lot of other languages. So if your team members need access to those other languages, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to send that to you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the product itself to show you how to put all of this into practice. Okay, so now you should be able to see my Party Matrix here that I have on display. This is our web application. So as you can see, front and center is the 4 quadrants, right? Everything that I have in Party Matrix revolves around these 4 quadrants. I don't just have a list. I have to decide where it fits within these 4 quadrants. Here's the structure of Party Matrix. On the left-hand side, these are the lists of projects that you have. So one thing I want to recommend is don't be afraid of creating more and more projects. This is a demo account that I have, of course, and so I have a few dozen projects here. In my actual work account, I have something like 300 plus projects. Within each project, you have the 4 quadrants. Now, there's different types of projects. Let me give you some examples. One, I have a personal priorities project, right? These are the things that I care about. These are the things that I work on personally. And it might be not the stuff that's related to the company itself, but just my own work that I have. So you can create different projects for that. Second, you might have a project that's a team priorities. So these are your direct reports that you work with. So you have a project for that. And so when you have that staff meeting, this is what you share. Then you have a project for goals for 2024. So one of the things you'll notice is actually I changed the 4 quadrant names here in goals. Instead of actually calling them do now, do later, I changed it to long-term goals, short-term goals. And the way you do that is on the right-hand side here. This is what's called the project details. This is a project that I also recommend customers do as well, which is to create a project for goals to help them be aligned to make sure that they work on the right things. Now we're in June, right? Midway through the year. I first created this project at the beginning of the year for 2024, for example. And of course, all of you have heard the stories of how, in the beginning of the year, you have a lot of ambitions, you create all these goals that you want. And then for some reason, February comes around and you've forgotten them all. Why? Well, it's because it's not top of mind. One of the challenges that we all face is that, we have 15 things that's coming in every single day. There's so many tasks that we have to do. Your manager's assigning you things, your customers asking you questions and so forth. Therefore, we have all these ambitions, but we're overwhelmed by everything else. So one of the goals I have that I put in my Party Matrix are things that I care about, and then I make sure that it comes back constantly, and I'll show you how to implement that. Okay, so these are the different types of projects, and so you might have transient projects or persistent projects. Everything I've shown you here are persistent projects, right? My personal priorities, my team priorities, they stick around. But my goals for 2024 is a transient project. This is my goal just for this year. Next year, I might have different goals. And so in Party Matrix, you can create those different types of projects that are for things that come and go. And again, it could be something for this quarter. It could be something that's for this year. It could be something that's just for this month, etc. So let me give you an example now. So when I go to my personal priorities, let's say one of the things I want to do is I want to follow up with you guys. So I want to follow up with my webinar participants. And so you saw how I click add item. I'm going to create a new item here, follow up with webinar participants. Okay, that's a simple, very simple task, something I have to do and make sure that I don't forget it. But instead of actually just creating the task, I can go ahead and say due tomorrow 2 p.m. And what Party Matrix does, it uses natural language because I say due tomorrow at 2 p.m. It interprets that and it actually sets the due date for me automatically. So now the system will create the task. And one of the things I recommend in general is that make sure that for your most important task, you set due dates. Because if we talk about importance and urgency, then the quadrant's very good for you to organize tasks by importance. But then if you don't set a date, how do you know if it's urgent or not? So you see how I created this task here. The due date is set for tomorrow at 2 p.m. It uses my local time. So what that means is for you, whatever your local time is, you'll set it to your local time there. And now tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'll get a notification that I got to work on this task. But here's the challenge, which is, let's just say, tomorrow comes 2 p.m., I get notification, but then I don't get around to it because I got a lot of other things I'm working on. So what happens? What happens to all of us is that when the due date approaches, we're thinking about it. The moment the due date passes, we're forgetting about it and forgetting about it and forgetting about it. And this happens to everybody because you have more things that's coming in and more things to anticipate. So one of the tricks around all of this is to actually set what I call reminders. So down here in the chat section, I can say, remind me daily. Now, guess what? The due date may come and go, but the reminders will keep on reminding me until I get this done. This is an extremely powerful way to ensure that you work on your most important tasks. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a task that involves 5 days worth of work to create a report, right? It's not something you can get done on that day. You create that task. So for example, make report for executive team. Okay, now it's going to take you several days of work for it. I'm going to say due in 2 weeks. But if you wait for 2 weeks to come by for you to start working on that, guess what? You're not going to get it done that day. So instead, what happens is that you will set this recurring reminders. I'm going to say remind me weekly here. So now it's top of mind and I'll get a reminder ahead of time to make sure that I actually get started on it. And so it's a very useful way to trick our brain to ensure that we're working on these urgent things. The same thing applies to everything else as well. So for example, when we think about emails, guess what? It's the last email in that we end up responding to, right? So we don't respond to the most important emails, we respond to the urgent emails. And in fact, someone who emails us 5 times, they're going to get our attention far more than someone who emails us once. And it's the spam, or it's the people who are sending unsolicited emails that's sending you far more emails than the most important emails that you typically get. So we are constantly spending our time looking at things that don't matter. So the way it works in Party Matrix is you can actually turn any email into a task. So let me show you how that works. If you happen to use Outlook, Party Matrix has a very powerful tool called Party Matrix for Outlook, turn email into tasks, that lets you take any email and convert it into a task with the proper due dates and proper reminders. If you're like me, you might get a lot of emails every single day. As I mentioned, I get a couple hundred emails per day. I can't go through all of them. I can't respond to all of them. So I do prioritize them as needed. So what I do is I would go and click on this this app right here. And then if you don't have Matrix already installed, click on Add Apps and add the Matrix turn email into task. You can see I can click on this button, and now I have the option to prioritize this email. I choose Prioritize Email. On the right-hand side here, a panel pops up, and I can actually change the item name. It just takes the subject as the item name here. I can choose what project it belongs in. So for example, let's see here, where's my personal priorities? I don't see it. So I'll go ahead and put it in my team project here. I'm going to put in quadrant 1. I'm going to assign this to another person. You don't have to, but sometimes you want to delegate it to somebody else to make sure that someone else answer the email. Then you can say due on the 30th, and then I can click capture email. What I've just done is I've turned this email into a task. And you see now on the right-hand side, it's that item details, just like what I showed you in the web application. I have the email, it's converted to a task, it's assigned to a person, it's in the right project, it's in the right quadrant, it has a due date to it. And then the email is uploaded here into the resources section. So my coworker can go and look at this email as needed. Or if you need to review this email in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something like that, you have the right email, the right context. And then I can say recurring reminders again, but instead of actually just remind me, I'm going to say remind everyone weekly. So now my coworker will also get a notification on a weekly basis to make sure that they answer this email. So imagine if you are in sales and you have someone requesting a quote, right? It's not just about flagging that email. It's not just about forwarding that email. It's about taking that email, creating a task, organizing it, and ensuring that there's a weekly reminder to respond to that email and get it done. Here's another cool thing about Matrix that is unique as far as I know. What happens if you get a follow-up email? So instead of actually just instead of just creating a new task from it, you can actually attach the email to an existing task. So let me show you how that works. So I click on apps again. I click Matrix. Now I click open Matrix instead. And now I can actually search for that specific task here. And I can actually attach this email to an existing task. This is a very useful way to keep things organized, especially if you have a lot of communication channel. Let me give you an example. Someone asked you to do something, right? You've already created the task for it. Then they follow up, but they didn't respond to the same thread. They follow up with a different email. If you go and take that email and convert it to a task, now you have duplicate tasks. If you just flag it, you might forget to respond. So by actually attaching the email to the same task, you keep it all in one central place, and your coworkers who's responsible for this will know exactly everything that's involved within that particular task. And not only that, when you have a new person who's taking over the task, they have all the emails across the entire span of the particular initiative or whatever in one central place. And so in Matrix, you can attach documents, you can attach links, you can attach SharePoint, you can attach Drive, you can attach websites, presentation, and then emails as well. So it's all together. So if you happen to use email, Matrix makes it very easy for you to do that. The other thing you can also do is you can actually go to the inbox here and copy your secret inbox address. So if you're like me, you check emails on your mobile device all the time, and sometimes you actually need to prioritize those emails on a mobile device. Now, Matrix works within Outlook for mobile, but I have an iPhone and I happen to use Apple Mail quite often, and so therefore I can't just use the Outlook integration. By copying the secret inbox address, which exists for you, every single person here, and then all your coworkers also have their own secret inbox address. So let me give you an example of how that works. Imagine if I'm on the go, I'm on my phone, instead of actually using the extension, or instead of just marking the email as unread, I can forward the email into that inbox address here. So my recommendation, copy your inbox address and save it as a contact called inbox Matrix. So when you forward an email, you just literally click forward, you type inbox, and it'll pre-fill the address out for you. And now in the body of the email, you could say, due next week, remind me daily. and you click send. And what happens is that this will create a task inside Matrix, set a due date for you, set a daily reminder so you get to that email. This is so useful, and I use this all the time because I'll get an email on my phone and it's important, or it's something that I need to deal with, but I cannot deal with it right now, but I don't want to forget it, so therefore I forward it into my inbox. Okay, and when you're in your inbox, you can see that you have a lot of tasks here. The inbox is your place where you track tasks that do not yet belong in a project. So let's just say, I have that example right here. This email I forwarded into my inbox. I open this task, and again, I have, all the history of everything here. But now I can actually hover over the very top, and I can move it to a project as needed. So when I mentioned to you earlier in Party Matrix around how you can create different projects, the inbox is a place where these tasks do not yet belong in a project, but you can organize them as needed. I also use my inbox to track tasks that are not so important, as in, things that I got to do, but they don't necessarily belong in any specific context. Now let's talk about the task a little bit more. So when I have a task selected, there's a couple of things I can do. I can obviously change the task name. So if you click on here, you can modify the task name as needed. And then second, you can star the task. So there's a little star icon here. When you star a task, it pops to the top of the list. If you have, let's say 30 items within a project, you can star a few tasks to make sure that it's at the top of each of the quadrants. But if you start every task, that won't work. Don't do that. If you start every task, if everything's important and urgent, then nothing is, right? So my recommendation is don't star more than 5 to 10 tasks within any particular project. Within the inbox, if you star the task in the inbox, you see how it pops to the very top of the inbox as well. It's a simple way to signify that it's an active task. So for me, I use the star to say, this is what I'm working on. And so when I do that, I can actually run special reports to find me all my star tasks, etc. Below that, you have the ability to change icons. So in this case, because it was an email, it automatically set an email icon, but I can click on here and change another icon. I've seen customers have success using the colors here, the red, yellow, and green. Green maybe to signify that things are on time. Red means they're behind schedule. It is totally up to you and the best practices that you build, whether or not you need icons. One of the most important thing in Party Matrix is ownership. And what that means is who's responsible. Now, there can only be one person who's responsible for any task. What you can do is you can click on this icon here and assign it to another person, right? And so now, Remy is responsible for this task, but I'm a follower. A follower is someone who will get updates when this task is modified. So if you're a manager, you create a task, you assign it to your direct reports, they'll be the owner, but you're a follower. And so when they mark it as done, or when they update it, or when they ask you a question, you'll get notifications around it. Next to that, you have progress, 0 to 100%. If it's 100%, that's considered done. And what happens is when you update the progress panel here, it actually updates the chat down here as a way to track the progress over time. So one of the things that's really important in Party Matrix is the ability to have a record of everything that you have. So what that means is, if someone takes over a task, they can look at the task and they can say, okay, you know what? This was set, this due date was set, this was modified, this document was attached, these are the subtasks, these are the things that were marked as done, and then these were the progress over time, 20%, 30%, etc. So this chat right here not only is a place where you can have conversation within the context of the task, it provides a record for that. And so because of that, you're able to go up here and print out that record if needed. So some organizations really rely on this as a way to keep track on the work that they have. Effort is a way to set the number of hours involved. So not all tasks are created equal. Some will take an hour, some will take half a day. And then you have the due dates and the reminders, as I mentioned earlier. These are the two most important features. So if you don't use the other features inside an item, make sure you set due dates and reminders for your most important task. And so we saw the chats. This is where you can also, one of the things I like to do is you use what's called the @ mention. So for example, let's say, hey, I can press the @ and then this pops up here and I can mention a person. Can you take a look at this? And so now what happens is they'll get a notification that they should take a look at it. So you've probably seen this in Microsoft Teams or other chat software, but it's the exact same thing here. In the notes section, this is where you can add subtasks as well as simple notes around whatever it is that you have to do. One of the features we have is what's called Fill with AI, where it will go and build out the item description for you. It's just a very simple way, where you create a high-level task, and then instead of having to write out all the details, you click Fill with AI, our system will write that out, then you can modify that as needed. The resources section is where all the other information is attached. So for example, because this is a forwarded email, of course, the email file is here. So you can click on this email file and open it. But also you can actually add links. So if you use SharePoint or Drive or whatever, it's here. You can also link to other items in Matrix. So for example, if I click on link existing item, I can say that this item is dependent on another item. And then I can also even say that this item blocks another item. And so if you do decide to use some of those advanced dependencies, Matrix will actually build you Gantt charts and timeline for you automatically. Okay, so that's everything related to an item. There's a lot more features, but again, I want to highlight that the most powerful, useful features in an item detail is the reminders and the due dates. Now let's talk about projects, since I mentioned how you can create so many different projects. If you click on projects here, you can click on show all projects. These are all the projects that you have. You can actually filter these projects if needed. So in the beginning, you might just have 5 or 10 projects, but then over time it becomes dozens or hundreds. So every project, if you select a project, it opened the project details here. And so in the project details, you can actually click on the star and also star the project. So my recommendation, again, is to not have more than 5 to 10 star projects. I star projects that are active. These are the things that I spend time every single day. And then below that, you have memberships. So members are people who have full access to this project. So for example, in your personal priority project, maybe you don't have anyone else. But in your team priority project, maybe you have additional people involved, right? And so you might have 5 or 10 people within a team project. And then if you have different initiatives, maybe each of those initiatives have a different group of people in there. And so you can completely customize that, and everyone's able to see everyone's priorities. I mentioned earlier how it's so important for everyone to be on the same page. That means one of your goals is to ensure that the right people are in the right projects. So, so then when they open up their Matrix, they can go to those projects and see what their priorities are and see what everyone's priorities are. So I highly, highly recommend that you create a project for your personal priorities, a project for your team, for that particular reason. So then you can ensure that everyone knows what everyone else is working on. I mentioned how down here you can actually change the quadrant names, and also you can change the quadrant colors as needed. So one of the reasons why we do that is because, while the Eisenhower Matrix is a very good framework, sometimes there's just other ways to look at the task. And so Matrix is really around organizing your information into various buckets. So you've probably seen various other methodologies such as effort impact, right? So instead of thinking about importance and urgency, you can say, hey, these are our tasks and let's organize them into effort and impact. So what are the things that's low efforts but high impact? That would be quadrant 1. High effort, high impact, that would be quadrant 2. So if you're brainstorming on the things that you need to work on, that would be one way to do that. Okay, so now let me show you how to create projects. So if you click on projects here, you can choose create project. There's several different ways to create project. The first is, of course, a blank project. So if I click on blank project here, I can type in the project name. I can choose a basic template that comes here, and I can choose a color. So when you create a project this way, the project literally has nothing in it except for the quadrant names and the colors. But sometimes one of the things you can do is instead use our AI to create an AI project. So let me give you an example. I think everyone should have a project around their goals. And in particular, if you're looking for a promotion, then you should find ways to get promoted and identify the tasks you need to do to get that promotion, right? So for example, get promoted from project manager to senior project manager. So this is just an example that I type in as a goal, and I click next. What's going to happen right now is actually our system will go and generate the task revolving around that goal for you. So I want you to try this, during this webinar or after this webinar, to make sure that you end up using Protomatrix for something that's meaningful to you, right? That's the key here. I don't think you should look at Protomatrix as a chore. I sure hope not, because it's around making sure that you benefit the most that you can. And so while your organization might rely on Protomatrix to track their tasks, you have to make sure that you are progressing along your path, whatever that may be. So that's an example of something you can do in Protomatrix. So that project is being created in the background right now. And when it's ready, I'll get a notification. So I'm going to go back to create project again. There's a couple of other ways to create project. You can go to what's called public templates. And public templates is essentially a list of templates that we have. So we actually have hundreds, maybe even thousands of templates that we've created that cover almost every single topic that you can imagine. And so when you go to public templates, you can actually choose from a subset of that, but we have an even broader list on our website. And then you can actually choose what's called My Templates. My Templates are templates that you've created internally for your own use. So for example, let's say your organization have a particular process that you follow every quarter, and that could be onboarding an employee or onboarding a client or something like that. You can create a project in Protomatrix, create all the tasks in Protomatrix, and then to set those due dates, then when you need to onboard a new employee, you go to My Templates here, choose Employee Onboarding Templates, and you enter the start date for the employee, and Protomatrix will create that task for you, along with all the due dates automatically propagated forward. It is super, super powerful way to save you a lot of time if you have repetitive processes. Similarly, if you're in sales, maybe you have a customer success onboarding project that, instead of having to recreate it every single time, you create it just one time in Protomatrix and save it as a template instead. So what happens is that I go back to my list here and check this out. My AI project is ready. I can click Open Action Plan. And now when I open that action plan, you can see how I have a series of tasks here that our system recommended. And so when you look at these tasks, you can click on it, you click on the notes here, and it actually gives you a little bit of details on what you can do. It sets a temporary due date for you. You can take a look at this, prioritize them, right? And say, okay, you know what, these are the things I want to prioritize. And then also from here, I can maybe identify tasks that are not relevant, and I can actually, for example, select the task here. I can say, you know what, this is not important. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. Or I can actually change the due date for all of these things as needed. So one of the things that we're trying to do here is we're trying to give you some shortcuts to help you get there faster. And while it's not perfect, it's a really, really good starting point. So that's an example of creating projects. Now I'm going to switch gear and talk about the one-on-one collaboration, the people-centric view of Protomatrix, because you can actually use Protomatrix in a totally different way. Instead of actually looking at these projects and tasks within the project, let's think about how you might work with people instead. So we have a very unique view called the one-on-one view. The way it works in the one-on-one view is it takes everything that you have across your entire Protomatrix and flips it around and show you the things where you share a task with another coworker. Let me give you an example. Let's say you manage a team of 5. You have 5 people that you delegate to all the time, right? And instead of having to click through every single matrix to know what it is they're working on, you go to the one-on-one view, you simply select the person, and now Protomatrix will show you all the tasks that you have with that person, regardless of the project. So that helps you in a one-on-one meeting because you can focus on those key tasks, right? And so when you have a one-on-one with one of your direct reports, instead of having a conversation that goes around, hey, so what did you work on last week? What's your goal for the next couple of weeks? Where can I help you, right? Those are the things you probably mention all the time. Instead, you can open up the one-on-one and take a look at this and see, okay, these are your priorities across everything that you have to do. These are the tasks that you've been working on, the things that are modified. These are the things that are overdue. These are the different quadrants that they're in. Let's talk about how I can best help you. Or if you identify a task you need to do, you can simply click on Add Share Task here and type in the task along with the due dates. it automatically assigns it to your direct reports and automatically adds you as a follower. So when that task is updated, you will get that notification. And then not only that, you can organize it into the various projects too. Otherwise, it defaults into the inbox, which means it's not in any specific projects. This one-on-one view is very, very useful. And in fact, some people can just use this view instead of any project at all, so it's very, very people-centric. And what's nice about it is it works with your manager, it works with your direct reports, it works with your clients if you end up collaborating with people outside your organizations. So now I want to mention real quick the concept of filters. So Protomatrix, obviously you can have a lot of information in Protomatrix, but almost in every single major view, there's something called filters. If you click on filters, all these other sorting options comes up, and it is super useful if you want to fine tune the information that's being shown. So for example, I can choose tasks that's assigned to only certain people. I can choose tasks that's assigned to only certain quadrants. I can choose tasks that are unfinished as well as things that are finished. So if you have let's say an annual review with one of your coworkers, right? You can open up the filter here, find all the tasks that are completed by a person, and now Protomatrix will show you only that information, and you can print that out if needed. So if you need access to every single task across your entire Protomatrix, that's when you go to the search view. The search view is a completely comprehensive view. So we used to call it the master view, and I think the master view describes it better. But essentially from here, you see everything that you have to do, everything everyone has to do, and click on the appropriate filters to find that information. One of the ways that I recommend you start your day is in the home view. So when you open the home view, there's an alert section here. Use this number 14. You see how it shows 14 and 14. This represents the number of tasks that requires my attention. So what will show up in alerts are due dates. So imagine if you create a task and it's due today, it'll pop up in the alerts. If you set a recurring reminders, it'll pop up in the alerts. If you get delegated a task, it'll pop up in the alerts. If someone mentions you in a task, it'll show up in the alerts. So the alerts is a place where you can go and check what are the things in Protomatrix that I should be spending my time on. And so you can click on each of those, it opens the task, and then it goes away from the alerts. And then the other thing you can do is you can actually click on this top right here and clear old notifications if needed. So for me personally, I clear old notifications all the time, but this is where those recurring reminders are so important because, I will get like hundreds of alerts, and of course it's overwhelming and I won't be able to go through them all. So I prioritize by going to the ones that explicitly mention me first. And then the tasks that are important, those are the ones where they keep on sending me notifications. And so when I see them, I'm like, oh, okay, I actually got to work on that. That's top of mind. In the home view, you have a couple of other options as well. The agenda is where you see the tasks that you have to do today and the tasks you have to do tomorrow and the next week. So it's a very time-centric view, but it allows you to see what are the things that's on your plate for this week. Then you can also go to My Items, which is essentially a list of all the tasks you have to do across your entire Protomatrix. So if you're a manager, you might spend a lot of time in the quadrants or in the one-on-one view. But if you are more of an individual contributor, or you're just trying to find out what it is you need to work on, then you spend time in the home view and look at the agenda and the My Items list. Okay. I want to do one more thing here, then I'm going to switch gears again. So when I go to projects, one of the things I want to show you is actually how you can actually look at Protomatrix from different perspective. So you saw the one-on-one perspective, but you can also go to the list view here and now see all the tasks within a matrix in the list view. This is useful if you want to see what are the things that are overdue. So because you can sort them here and find out all the overdue tasks, they're colored red here. Or you can go to the calendar view, which shows you all the tasks that you have, but with the dates on them, and you can drag and drop them around the calendar as needed. Then you have the Gantt chart view, which essentially is a timeline view that shows you all the tasks, but span across much, much longer time period. So the calendar is good for seeing things that are due in 1 week or 1 month, but the Gantt chart is good for seeing things that are spanning across quarters or years. All right, I'm going to jump into Microsoft Teams. If you do use Microsoft Teams, Protomatrix is one of the most integrated solutions. Simply install Protomatrix here, and then afterwards pin it on the left-hand side. And as you can see, inside Microsoft Teams, I can open up my Protomatrix and see everything that I have within Teams, and I don't have to leave Teams I can actually access all my tasks. The view looks almost similar to what you saw in the web app, but here's some cool things. Inside the chat section, I can actually open what's called the one-on-one view within my coworker's chat. So what that means is if you have 4 or 5 team members that you're in constant conversation with, you can click on this plus icon, choose Protomatrix, choose the one-on-one view, and then it opens this one-on-one view right here with that person. And then you can see all the tasks you have with your coworker directly from here, and you don't even have to go into Protomatrix to see this task. So if you're a manager, you can interact with Protomatrix this way without ever having to create projects or open Protomatrix at all. And not only that, Protomatrix integrates with the conversation as well. So imagine if you and a coworker are having a conversation, and then you realize one of the things you have to do is create a task from that. You click on this ... here, choose create PM item, and you can actually create the task directly here within Microsoft Teams. So it allows you to create the task. And not only that, we link back to this moment in time when you created this conversation. So what that means is 6 months from now, you were trying to understand, hey, what were we talking about when we created this task? You can actually open Protomatrix and click on the link and jump to Microsoft Teams, and it opens the conversation within the context that you had. The way that you can add Protomatrix is actually down here in the plus icon, and then you can actually install Protomatrix. And what that does too is it installs the Protomatrix chatbot, which is one way for you to get those notifications as well. So for example, when you have those things that are due or overdue and someone assigns you a task, the chatbot is your friend. It'll send you that notification, so then you know, okay, you know what, these are the things that requires my attention, or these are the things that are overdue. There's a lot more that we integrate with inside Teams. I'm not showing you, but that's something that you can explore down the road. Okay, so I'm going to jump back into my presentation here and wrap things up. So if you do nothing else after this webinar, make sure you sign up for Protomatrix. If you happen to use Teams and Outlook, then make sure you add those extensions that I mentioned. Make sure that you create a project highlighting your top priorities. Again, I think that at the individual level, Protomatrix, I mean, to me, you personally, like for the individuals to prioritize their tasks, that's where the ultimate success with Protomatrix come from. If you are successful in prioritizing, everything else will fall into place. And then ask each of your coworker to do the same. If you're in a management position, make sure your direct reports are using Protomatrix to track their priorities. So then when you have a conversation, you just share the screen, and it is so powerful to be aligned. Make it explicit. Don't have it be in their head, and then when you have a conversation, you don't really know exactly what everyone is doing or is working on. But when you have it in Protomatrix, it is so explicit, and there's no denying that we're not on the same page, because you will be on the same page. And then you sit down and compare notes, share the screen with each other, share the project with each other. If you're ambitious, make sure you create a project for your personal priorities. I also recommend that you create a project for your goals, as well as your goals, as in your personal goals, as also your professional goals, and then invite team members to share a team priority project. Some advice: make sure you use Protomatrix to track high impact tasks. If you ever have to make a decision and need to prioritize, that's what Protomatrix is for. And then use Protomatrix as a communication tool. So when I say communication tool, it's about showing everyone else what it is that you're working on. And so if you do that, then you're communicating to everybody else your priorities, and everyone else should be communicating to you what their priorities are. And then using Protomatrix to manage your individual goals. What success should look like on a personal level: you should be checking Protomatrix at least every week to remind yourself of your goals, and then using it as one central place to track the work that you need to get done. At the team level, everyone on the team understands and are aligned on key tasks. So what that means is, instead of having a conversation with each other and say, what are you working on? You should be opening up Protomatrix instead. If you have a lot of important emails and you're having problems prioritizing them, or you're not responding to them, or your coworkers are having problems not responding to important emails, then make sure you use the email integrations that we have. You can actually triage it to different team members, set those due dates, and then Thirdly, being able to see everyone's priorities in real time asynchronously. More so than ever before, you're not working with everyone in the same office, right? You have people distributed in different places and so forth. You don't want to have to get a get together just to be aligned. You should be able to open that Party Matrix, go to the share projects and see what the priorities are for every single one of those people. So if you're doing those things, you're using Party Matrix correctly. All right, with that, I'm going to end my presentation and demo. As I mentioned, the webinars are recorded and we'll post there. And now, of course, there's so many other ways to use Protomatrix and more advanced topics. So be sure to explore that. If there are any questions right now, I will check the chat and I'd be happy to address that. Thank you so much.